The maintenance tent was always quiet during the afternoon hours. Most soldiers were either on patrol, resting in their bunks, or grabbing a late lunch from the mess hall. This was exactly how Elena preferred it. She sat cross-legged on a worn canvas stool, her dark hair pulled back in a tight ponytail, completely absorbed in her work. The suppressor lay disassembled before her on a clean white cloth. Each piece was arranged with military precision, the baffles, the end cap, the mounting threads. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, cleaning each component with a small brush and solvent. This wasn't just routine maintenance. It was almost meditative for her. The repetitive motions, the familiar smell of gun oil, the satisfaction of making something function perfectly. Elena had been doing this same ritual for 3 years now, ever since she'd been assigned to the 3rd Infantry Division's reconnaissance unit. At 24, she was younger than most of the other specialists in her unit, but her skills had earned her respect among the seasoned soldiers. She rarely spoke unless spoken to, preferring to let her work speak for itself. The tent flap rustled slightly in the desert breeze. Outside, she could hear the distant hum of generators, the occasional radio chatter, and the rumble of vehicles moving through the compound. But inside her small corner of the maintenance area, everything was calm and controlled. She picked up the main body of the suppressor, examining it closely under the harsh fluorescent light. A tiny speck of carbon buildup caught her attention near one of the baffles. Most people would have missed it, but Elena's trained eye picked up even the smallest imperfections. She reached for a smaller brush, one with bristles so fine they looked like individual hairs. As she worked, her mind wandered to the mission they'd completed 2 days ago. It had been a success, like most of her assignments. The target had been neutralized from 800 meters away, a clean shot that prevented what intelligence suggested would have been a major attack on a nearby village. The local population would never know how close they'd come to disaster, and that was fine with Elena. She didn't do this work for recognition or praise. The small red ribbon around her left wrist caught the light as she moved. It was barely noticeable, just a thin piece of fabric that most people assumed was some kind of good luck charm, or perhaps a reminder of someone back home. Elena never explained what it meant, and no one had ever asked directly. In a military environment where everyone had their own ways of coping with stress and danger, a simple ribbon seemed harmless enough. She continued her methodical cleaning, each movement precise and deliberate. The suppressor was a crucial piece of equipment for her role. It didn't just reduce the sound of her rifle, it also helped conceal muzzle flash and reduce recoil. In her line of work, remaining undetected often meant the difference between completing a mission successfully and not coming home at all. The afternoon sun was beginning to shift, casting longer shadows across the tent. Elena worked steadily, occasionally pausing to examine her progress or reach for a different tool. She took pride in maintaining her equipment to the highest standards. Her rifle was cleaned after every use, her scope was calibrated regularly, and every piece of gear was inspected and maintained according to strict protocols. Other soldiers sometimes joked about her perfectionism, calling her obsessive or overly careful. But Elena knew that in her profession, there was no such thing as being too careful. Every detail mattered. A single grain of sand in the wrong place, a loose screw, or a slightly misaligned component could compromise everything. She thought about her training back at Fort Benning, where she'd first discovered her natural aptitude for precision shooting. The instructors had noticed her ability almost immediately. The way she could control her breathing, steady her hands, and maintain focus even under pressure. What had started as basic marksmanship training had evolved into something much more specialized. The ribbon on her wrist shifted slightly as she reached for another tool. Each time she completed a mission successfully, she tied a small knot in the fabric. It was her own private way of keeping track, something that helped her process the weight of her responsibilities. The knots were tiny, barely visible unless someone looked closely, but Elena knew exactly how many there were. She'd never told anyone about the significance of the ribbon, not even her closest friend in the unit, Sergeant Martinez. Some things were meant to be private, and this was one of them. It wasn't about pride or keeping score in some macabre game. It was about remembering that each mission represented lives saved, threats eliminated, and dangers prevented. The suppressor was nearly clean now. Elena held each piece up to the light, checking for any remaining residue or wear. Everything looked perfect exactly as it should. She began reassembling the device, her fingers moving automatically through the familiar sequence. Thread the baffles, align the end cap, tighten to the proper torque specification. As she worked, she could hear footsteps approaching the tent. Heavy boots on the packed dirt outside, moving with the purposeful stride of someone on official business. Elena didn't look up from her work, but she was aware of the sound growing closer. In a military environment, you learn to pay attention to such things without appearing to do so. The footsteps paused just outside the tent. Elena continued her work, but she could sense someone standing there, perhaps trying to decide whether to enter or move on. She attached the suppressor to her rifle and checked the alignment, making sure everything was properly seated and secure. "Private Chen," a voice called from outside the tent. It was Major Harrison, her commanding officer. His tone was neutral, giving no indication of whether this was a routine check or something more significant. Elena set down her rifle and stood up, automatically straightening her uniform. "Yes, sir," she replied, her voice steady and professional. "I need to speak with you," the major said, stepping into the tent. His eyes immediately went to her workstation, taking in the meticulously organized tools and the perfectly maintained equipment. Then his gaze shifted to Elena herself, and she noticed him glance briefly at her left wrist where the red ribbon was clearly visible in the bright tent lighting. Major Harrison stepped fully into the tent, his presence immediately changing the atmosphere. Elena remained at attention, her hands at her sides, but she could feel his eyes studying her. The major was a tall man in his early 40s, with graying hair at his temples and the kind of weathered face that came from years of military service in difficult conditions. "At ease, Private," he said, but his voice carried an unusual weight. Elena relaxed slightly but remained alert. She'd served under Major Harrison for 18 months and she could read his moods fairly well. This wasn't a routine visit. The major's gaze swept over her workstation again, noting the pristine condition of her equipment. Elena's rifle lay on the cleaning mat, the suppressor freshly attached and gleaming under the tent's harsh lighting. Every tool was in its proper place, every surface clean and organized. It was the workspace of someone who took their profession seriously. "Fine work, as always," Major Harrison said, nodding toward her rifle. "Your equipment maintenance reports are consistently exemplary." He paused, then added, "Your mission performance has been equally impressive." Elena felt a slight tension in her chest. Compliments from the major were rare and they usually preceded something significant. She kept her expression neutral and waited for him to continue. "I've been reviewing your service record," Major Harrison went on, pulling a folder from under his arm. 3 years of active duty, specialized training at multiple facilities, consistently high marks in all evaluations." He opened the folder and glanced at the contents. "Particularly notable performance in reconnaissance and precision engagement operations." The major moved closer to Elena's workstation, his eyes taking in every detail. The cleaning supplies were arranged in perfect order, the rifle components laid out with mathematical precision. But then his attention seemed to focus on something specific. "That's an interesting piece," he said, gesturing toward Elena's left wrist. "The ribbon. Is it significant?" Elena felt her pulse quicken slightly, but her voice remained steady. "Just a personal item, sir. For luck?" Major Harrison nodded slowly, but his expression suggested he wasn't entirely satisfied with that explanation. "I see. And have you found it particularly lucky?" The question hung in the air between them. Elena could sense that this conversation was heading somewhere specific, but she wasn't sure where. "I suppose so, sir. I've been fortunate in my assignments." "Fortunate," the major repeated almost to himself. He closed the folder and looked directly at Elena. "Private Chen, how many successful missions have you completed since joining this unit?" Elena felt a cold sensation in her stomach. This was definitely not a routine visit. "I don't keep count, sir. Each mission is just part of my duty." "No, I suppose you wouldn't keep count," Major Harrison said. "That's not the kind of thing most soldiers would want to dwell on." He paused, then continued. "But records are kept nonetheless. Official records." The major opened his folder again and pulled out a sheet of paper. Elena could see rows of dates and brief descriptions, but she couldn't read the details from where she stood. "According to our mission reports," Major Harrison said, You have successfully completed 289 precision engagement operations over the past 3 years. Each one a confirmed success. Each one preventing potential threats to coalition forces or civilian populations. Elena's heart was racing now, but she kept her expression controlled. The number he'd mentioned was exact, precise. Too precise to be a coincidence. That's a remarkable record, Private, the Major continued. Unprecedented, actually. Most specialists in your field might complete 50 or 60 such missions over an entire career. You've done nearly 300 in 3 years. He stepped closer to Elena, close enough that she could see the concern in his eyes behind his professional demeanor. What's particularly interesting is that this number seems to correspond to something else. Major Harrison's gaze dropped to Elena's wrist again, to the thin red ribbon that she'd thought was barely noticeable. Our intelligence analysts have very good eyes, Private. They notice patterns, details that others might miss. Elena remained silent, but inside she was calculating rapidly. How much did he know? How much had they observed? She'd been so careful to keep her private ritual exactly that. Private. They counted the knots, Major Harrison said quietly. 289 small knots tied in a red ribbon. One for each successful mission. The tent felt smaller suddenly, the air thicker. Elena realized that her secret hadn't been as secret as she'd thought. In a military environment where everything was watched, monitored, and analyzed, even the smallest personal habits could be noticed and catalogued. "Sir, I can explain," Elena began, but the Major held up a hand. "You don't need to explain anything, Private. You haven't violated any regulations. Keeping personal mementos is perfectly acceptable, as long as they don't interfere with duties or operational security." He paused, but this particular memento has caught the attention of some very important people. Elena felt a sinking sensation. "Important people, sir?" "Pentagon officials, Defense Department analysts, people who make decisions about promotions, transfers, and special assignments." Major Harrison closed the folder and tucked it back under his arm. When someone achieves the kind of success rate you have, it tends to get noticed at very high levels. The implications of what he was saying began to sink in. Elena had always tried to keep a low profile, to do her job efficiently and without drawing attention. The ribbon had been her way of processing the emotional weight of her work, nothing more. She'd never intended it to become a symbol or a record that others would scrutinize. "There's going to be a meeting," Major Harrison said, "tomorrow morning at 800 hours. Some people want to talk to you about your service record, your methods, your perspective on your work." Elena swallowed hard. "What kind of meeting, sir?" "The kind where careers are either advanced very rapidly or redirected entirely," the Major replied. "The kind where your future is decided by people who've never been in the field, but who understand the strategic value of exceptional performance." He moved toward the tent opening, then paused and turned back to Elena. "Private, in all my years of military service, I've seen many skilled soldiers. I've seen brave soldiers, dedicated soldiers, soldiers who were good at their jobs, but I've never seen anyone with your particular combination of skill and consistency." Elena wasn't sure if that was meant as a compliment or something else. "Entirely. The question they're going to ask tomorrow," Major Harrison continued, "is whether someone with your capabilities should continue in their current role, or whether you might be more valuable in a different capacity entirely." He looked at her wrist again. "They're going to want to understand what drives someone to keep such a precise accounting of their successes." The Major started to leave, then stopped one more time. "Private Chen, I want you to be prepared for tomorrow. These people are going to ask difficult questions about your motivations, your methods, and your future plans. Answer honestly, but remember that your responses could determine not just your own career, but potentially the direction of your entire unit." As his footsteps faded away outside the tent, Elena sank back onto her stool. The suppressor lay in front of her, perfectly clean and ready for the next mission. But now she wondered if there would be a next mission, at least not in the way she'd come to expect. She looked down at the red ribbon around her wrist, at the tiny knots that she'd thought were invisible to everyone but herself. 289 knots. 289 missions. 289 moments when her skills had made a difference. Tomorrow she would have to explain what those numbers meant to her and why she'd felt compelled to keep such a careful count. Elena barely slept that night. She lay on her narrow bunk, staring at the canvas ceiling of the tent she shared with 3 other soldiers. The familiar sounds of the night shift filtered through the fabric walls, distant radio chatter, the occasional vehicle, the steady hum of generators. But her mind was racing, replaying the conversation with Major Harrison over and over. By 0600 hours, she was already up and dressed in her cleanest uniform. She'd polished her boots until they gleamed and made sure every badge and insignia was perfectly positioned. If she was going to face whatever this meeting held, she would do it looking like the professional soldier she'd trained to be. The mess hall was nearly empty when she arrived for breakfast. Elena forced herself to eat, knowing she needed the energy, but the food tasted like cardboard. She kept thinking about the red ribbon around her wrist, now hidden beneath the cuff of her long-sleeve uniform shirt. 289 knots. She'd never realized how much that number would come to define her. At 0745 hours, Elena reported to the administrative building, a prefabricated structure that housed the command offices. The building was busier than usual, with several vehicles parked outside that she didn't recognize. Official-looking sedans with government plates and communications equipment that suggested important visitors. The receptionist, a young corporal, directed Elena to conference room B. "They're waiting for you, Private Chen," he said, and something in his voice suggested that everyone in the building knew about this meeting. Elena knocked on the door and was told to enter. The room was larger than she'd expected, with a long table surrounded by chairs. 5 people were already seated, and Elena could immediately tell that only one of them was regular military. Major Harrison sat at one end of the table, still in his standard field uniform. The others wore civilian clothes, dark suits that screamed government officials. 2 men and 2 women, all middle-aged, all with the kind of serious expressions that came with making important decisions about other people's lives. "Private Chen, please have a seat," said one of the women, gesturing to a chair across from them. Elena sat down, her back straight, hands folded in her lap. She could feel all 5 pairs of eyes studying her, taking in every detail of her appearance and demeanor. "I'm Director Williams from the Defense Intelligence Agency," the woman continued. "This is Assistant Director Brooks, Colonel Patterson from Personnel Command, and Dr. Reeves from the Army Research Institute." Each person nodded as they were introduced. "We're here to discuss your service record and some potential opportunities." Elena nodded but remained silent, waiting for them to explain what this was really about. Director Williams opened a thick folder. "Private Chen, your performance over the past 3 years has been extraordinary. Your success rate is unprecedented, your reliability is absolute, and your psychological evaluations indicate exceptional stability under pressure." She paused. "We'd like to understand what drives such consistent excellence." The question Elena had been dreading. She could feel the red ribbon against her wrist, hidden but somehow feeling more obvious than ever. "I try to do my job to the best of my abilities, ma'am. Every mission is important." "Indeed," said Assistant Director Brooks, leaning forward. "But most soldiers, even the very best ones, experience some variation in performance. Bad days, difficult conditions, equipment problems, stress. Your record shows no such variation. Every mission, successful completion. Every time." Colonel Patterson consulted his own set of papers. "We've spoken with your training instructors, your previous commanding officers, your teammates. They all describe you as dedicated, focused, and exceptionally skilled, but they also mention that you're very private, that you don't discuss your work or your methods with others." Elena felt a bead of sweat form between her shoulder blades despite the air conditioning. "I prefer to focus on the mission rather than talk about it, sir." Dr. Reeves, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "Private Chen, psychological research indicates that soldiers who engage in high-stress, high-consequence activities need coping mechanisms, ways to process the emotional and psychological impact of their work. We're curious about your personal methods." This was it. The moment Elena had been dreading since Major Harrison's visit. She could lie, deflect, or give vague answers, but something told her that these people already knew more than they were letting on. The intelligence analyst who had counted the knots in her ribbon wouldn't have stopped there. "I have a personal ritual," Elena said carefully, "something that helps me maintain focus and remember the importance of each mission." "Could you describe this ritual?" Director Williams asked, her voice neutral but attentive. Elena glanced at Major Harrison, who gave her an almost imperceptible nod of encouragement. "After each successful mission, I tie a small knot in a ribbon I wear. It helps me remember that each mission represents lives protected or threats eliminated. How many knots are currently in this ribbon? Colonel Patterson asked. Elena's throat felt dry. 289, sir. The room fell silent for a moment. Dr. Reeves made a note on his pad. Director Williams exchanged glances with her colleagues. That's a very precise form of record-keeping, Assistant Director Brooks observed. Most soldiers would prefer not to dwell on such specific counts. It's not about dwelling on the numbers, Elena said, finding her voice stronger now that the secret was out. It's about remembering that each number represents something meaningful. People who are safe because a threat was removed. Attacks that didn't happen. Lives that were saved. Dr. Reeves looked up from his notes. That's a remarkably healthy psychological framework, Private Chen. Many soldiers in similar roles struggle with guilt, detachment, or other emotional difficulties. Your approach suggests you found a way to derive meaning and purpose from very challenging work. Elena wasn't sure if that was good or bad news. Director Williams leaned back in her chair. Private Chen, the reason we're here is that your performance has caught the attention of several specialized programs within the Department of Defense. Programs that require individuals with your particular skill set and psychological profile. What kind of programs, ma'am? Colonel Patterson took over. Advanced training opportunities. Specialized units that handle the most sensitive and critical missions. Assignments that would make full use of your capabilities while providing opportunities for career advancement. Elena felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. Are you offering me a transfer, sir? We're offering you choices, Director Williams said. You could continue in your current role, which is certainly valuable, or you could consider several alternatives. Enhanced training programs that would expand your skill set, leadership positions where you could train other specialists, or assignment to units that handle the most critical national security missions, Assistant Director Brooks added. Each option comes with different responsibilities, different challenges, and different levels of visibility. Some assignments would keep you in the field. Others would eventually move you toward strategic planning or training roles. Elena looked around the table at the faces watching her. These people had the power to reshape her entire future with a few signatures on the right documents. But they were asking for her input, her preferences. May I ask a question? Elena said. Of course, Director Williams replied. Would any of these opportunities allow me to continue doing work that makes a difference? Work that protects people? Dr. Reeves smiled for the first time during the meeting. Private Chen, that's exactly the kind of question we hoped you'd ask. It confirms our assessment of your motivations and priorities. Major Harrison spoke for the first time since the introductions. Elena, these people are offering you opportunities that most soldiers never even hear about. Whatever you decide, you'll have my full support. Elena looked down at her hands, thinking about the ribbon hidden beneath her sleeve. 289 knots. 289 moments when her skills had mattered. Whatever came next, she wanted to make sure that number could continue to grow, that her work would continue to have meaning. Director Williams opened another folder, this one marked with security classifications that Elena had never seen before. Since you've expressed interest in continuing meaningful work, let me describe the opportunities in more detail. She pulled out several documents, each with official letterheads from different military and intelligence agencies. The first option is immediate assignment to the Army's Special Operations Command. You would receive additional training in advanced reconnaissance techniques, counterterrorism operations, and mission planning. Your current skills would be enhanced with new capabilities. Elena listened carefully as Director Williams continued. The second option is a training position at the Army Sniper School. You would work with new recruits, sharing your expertise and helping develop the next generation of specialists. This would eventually lead to leadership opportunities within the training command. Colonel Patterson took over for the third option. The Defense Intelligence Agency has a specialized unit that handles the most sensitive international operations. Deep cover assignments, often working alone or with very small teams. This would require additional security clearances and extensive psychological evaluation, but the impact of your work would be significant. The fourth option came from Assistant Director Brooks. The CIA has expressed interest in your profile for their Special Activities Division. This would involve training in multiple disciplines beyond marksmanship, languages, cultural studies, advanced surveillance techniques. The missions would be varied and challenging. Elena felt overwhelmed by the scope of what they were offering. Each option represented a completely different path, a different future, How long do I have to decide? 72 hours, Director Williams replied. These opportunities won't remain open indefinitely, and some of the training programs have specific start dates. Dr. Reeves leaned forward. Private Chen, I want to emphasize something important. Whatever you choose, you'll have access to comprehensive psychological support. The military has learned a great deal about helping soldiers process the demands of specialized roles. You won't have to rely solely on personal coping mechanisms. Elena understood what he was really saying. They knew about her ribbon, her counting system, and they wanted her to know that there were other ways to handle the emotional weight of her work. But the ribbon had worked for her. It had given her a way to find meaning in difficult circumstances. Dr. Reeves, if I were to accept one of these positions, would I be allowed to maintain my current personal practices? As long as they don't interfere with operational security or mission effectiveness, yes. In fact, your particular approach demonstrates a level of self-awareness and emotional intelligence that we value highly. Major Harrison spoke up. Elena, I want you to know that whatever you decide, your current unit will support your choice. If you stay, you'll continue to have opportunities for advancement. If you leave, you'll do so with the highest recommendations. Director Williams gathered her papers. We'd like to give you time to consider these options carefully. Each choice comes with detailed briefing materials that you can review. She handed Elena a sealed envelope. These documents contain more specific information about each opportunity, including training timelines, duty locations, and general descriptions of the work involved. Elena took the envelope, feeling its weight. Inside were documents that could reshape her entire life. Ma'am, may I ask why these opportunities are being offered to me specifically? There must be other qualified soldiers, Assistant Director Brooks answered. There are other skilled soldiers, Private Chen, but your combination of technical ability, psychological stability, and proven performance in high-pressure situations is rare. Very rare, Colonel Patterson added. Your success rate speaks for itself. But what impressed us most is how you've maintained that level of performance over 3 years, without showing signs of stress, burnout, or degraded effectiveness. That kind of consistency suggests you've found a sustainable way to handle very demanding work. Elena thought about the long hours she'd spent cleaning her equipment, the quiet moments in the maintenance tent, the ritual of tying knots in her ribbon. Those activities had become her way of processing each mission, of maintaining her emotional balance. She'd never thought of them as particularly remarkable. The military is evolving, Director Williams explained. We're learning to identify and nurture different types of excellence. Your approach to your work demonstrates a maturity and self-awareness that we want to cultivate in our most important assignments. Dr. Reeves closed his notebook. Private Chen, I want you to understand that whatever you choose, you'll be entering environments where your well-being is a priority. The days of sending soldiers into impossible situations without adequate support are ending. These programs invest heavily in their personnel. Elena nodded, but she was thinking about something else entirely. If I were to accept one of these positions, would my work still involve direct mission execution? Or would I eventually move away from field operations? That depends on which path you choose, Director Williams replied. Some options keep you in the field indefinitely. Others gradually transition you toward training, planning, or leadership roles. We can discuss the long-term trajectory of each option in detail once you've had time to review the materials. Major Harrison stood up, indicating that the meeting was concluding. Elena, take the time you need to make the right decision. This isn't just about the next assignment, it's about the direction of your entire career. As the officials gathered their papers and prepared to leave, Director Williams approached Elena directly. Private Chen, I want you to know that your service record is already impressive enough to guarantee you opportunities throughout your career. These specific offers are a recognition of exceptional performance, but they're not your only path forward. Elena stood and saluted as the officials filed out of the room. Major Harrison remained behind, waiting until they were alone before speaking. Elena, I've seen a lot of soldiers over the years, and I've never seen anyone face opportunities like these. Whatever you decide, make sure it's what you want, not what you think others expect from you. Elena looked down at the envelope in her hands. Sir, how did they really find out about the ribbon? You said intelligence analyst, but... Major Harrison smiled slightly. Elena, in a military environment, everything is observed. Your bunkmates noticed that you always adjusted your sleeve after returning from missions. Your equipment maintenance was always done at specific times in specific ways, small patterns that individually meant nothing but together suggested something significant. Elena felt a mixture of embarrassment and resignation. She'd thought she was being discreet, but apparently, discretion was impossible when you lived and worked so closely with other people. The important thing, Major Harrison continued, is that what they observed suggested positive coping mechanisms and strong professional discipline. That's why you're being offered these opportunities. Not because anyone thinks there's anything wrong with your approach. Elena nodded, understanding better now how her private ritual had become public knowledge. In some ways, it was a relief that the secret was finally out. Take the 72 hours, Major Harrison advised. Read the materials thoroughly, and remember that whatever you choose, you've already proven you can handle difficult assignments with excellence. As Elena left the administrative building, the weight of the envelope seemed to increase with each step. Inside were detailed descriptions of futures she'd never imagined. Opportunities that could take her career in directions she'd never considered. She walked back toward her quarters, past the maintenance tent where she'd been working when this all began. The familiar environment of the military base suddenly felt different, as if she was seeing it from the perspective of someone who might soon be leaving. That evening, Elena sat on her bunk and opened the envelope. The documents inside were comprehensive, detailed, and intimidating. Each opportunity was described in terms of training requirements, mission scope, career progression, and long-term prospects. As she read, Elena unconsciously touched the ribbon beneath her sleeve. 289 knots. Soon she would have to decide if that number would continue to grow in her current role, or if her future successes would be counted in entirely different ways. Elena spent the next 48 hours in deep contemplation. She read through each document multiple times, making notes and comparing the different opportunities. The Special Operations Command assignment would keep her in familiar territory, but with enhanced responsibilities. The training position would allow her to share her knowledge with new soldiers. The intelligence roles promised challenging and varied missions. On the second evening, she found herself back in the maintenance tent, cleaning her rifle even though it didn't need it. The familiar routine helped her think. As she worked, Sergeant Martinez found her there. "Heard you've got some big decisions to make," he said, settling onto a nearby stool. Martinez was one of the few soldiers Elena considered a real friend. They'd served together for 2 years, and he'd never asked intrusive questions about her methods or motivations. "Word travels fast," Elena replied, not looking up from her work. "In a place like this, everything travels fast." Martinez watched her hands move over the rifle components. "You know, I always wondered about that ribbon you wear." "Never asked, figured it was personal." Elena paused in her cleaning. "It is personal, but apparently not as private as I thought." "Want to talk about it?" Martinez asked. "Sometimes it helps to say things out loud." Elena set down her cleaning rod and looked at her friend. "Each knot represents a successful mission. A threat eliminated, lives protected. It started as just a way to process what I was doing, but it became something more important." Martinez nodded slowly. "That's not a bad way to handle things. Better than some of the methods I've seen soldiers use. The problem is now everyone knows about it. The ribbon, the counting, all of it. And they're offering me these opportunities partly because of how I handle my work." Elena resumed cleaning, her movements more agitated now. "I don't know if I want my private coping mechanism to become the reason for my career advancement." "Maybe that's the wrong way to look at it," Martinez suggested. "Maybe they're not interested in the ribbon itself, but in what it represents. The fact that you found a healthy way to deal with difficult work, that you maintain your standards and your sanity." Elena considered this perspective. She'd been so focused on the fact that her secret had been discovered that she hadn't fully appreciated what it might mean to others. "What would you do?" she asked Martinez. "Me? I'd probably pick the option that lets me keep doing work that matters, but with better support and more resources." He paused. "But I'm not you. You're the one who has to live with whatever choice you make." That night, Elena made her decision. She wrote a brief letter stating her preference and sealed it in an envelope. But before submitting it, she wanted to have one more conversation. The next morning, she requested a meeting with Major Harrison. He agreed to see her immediately, and they met in his office rather than a formal conference room. "I've made my decision, sir," Elena said, handing him the sealed envelope. "But before you open it, I wanted to ask you something." Go ahead, Major Harrison replied, setting the envelope aside. In your opinion, does my personal ritual interfere with my professional effectiveness? Does it make me seem unstable or unreliable? Major Harrison leaned back in his chair. Elena, your personal ritual is the reason you're the most reliable soldier I've ever commanded. It's given you a way to find meaning in difficult work without becoming callous or detached. That's not instability, that's maturity. Elena felt a weight lift from her shoulders. I've been worried that counting my successes might seem ghoulish or inappropriate. On the contrary, Major Harrison said, most soldiers try to forget the details of their work, to compartmentalize and move on. You've found a way to acknowledge the importance of what you do while maintaining your humanity. That's remarkable. He picked up the envelope. May I? Elena nodded and Major Harrison opened her letter. His eyebrows rose slightly as he read her choice. The Defense Intelligence Agency assignment, he said. That's the most challenging option they offered. Deep cover work, often alone, high-risk missions. Yes, sir. It's also the option that would allow me to continue making a direct difference while expanding my capabilities. Elena straightened in her chair. I've realized that the ribbon isn't just about counting successes. It's about remembering that each mission has consequences beyond the immediate tactical objective. The DIA work would involve complex situations where that perspective would be valuable. Major Harrison nodded approvingly. You've thought this through carefully. The DIA assignment will require 18 months of additional training before your first deployment. Languages, cultural studies, advanced surveillance, multiple weapon systems. It's comprehensive. I understand, sir. I'm ready for the challenge. There's something else you should know, Major Harrison said, opening his desk drawer. I received a call this morning from Director Williams. Apparently, your psychological profile and performance metrics have impressed some very senior people. If you succeed in the DIA program, there will likely be additional opportunities down the road. Elena felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. What kind of opportunities? The kind that don't officially exist, Major Harrison replied. Assignments that require someone with your particular combination of skills and psychological stability. Work that makes a difference on a global scale. He handed Elena a new set of documents. These are your orders for reporting to the DIA training facility. You'll leave in 2 weeks. In the meantime, you'll complete your current mission assignments and transition your equipment to your replacement. Elena looked at the orders, seeing her future laid out in official language and bureaucratic formatting. Sir, will I be able to maintain contact with my current unit? Limited contact during training for security reasons. But once you're operational, you'll be able to communicate with former colleagues within appropriate channels. Major Harrison smiled. Elena, you're about to enter a world where your work will have impacts you might never fully know about. But trust me when I say that your skills will be put to excellent use. As Elena prepared to leave, Major Harrison called her back. One more thing. The DIA specifically requested that you be allowed to maintain your personal practices and coping mechanisms. They understand that what works for you shouldn't be changed unnecessarily. Elena touched her wrist where the ribbon lay hidden. Thank you, sir. That means more than you know. Over the next 2 weeks, Elena completed her final missions with her current unit. Each successful operation added another knot to her ribbon, bringing the total to 295. She cleaned and transferred her equipment to Private Jackson, a newer soldier who would be taking over some of her responsibilities. On her last evening at the base, Elena sat in the maintenance tent one final time. The space felt different now, knowing she wouldn't be returning. Sergeant Martinez found her there as she'd hoped he would. So this is it, he said, sitting on his familiar stool. You're really leaving? I'm really leaving, Elena confirmed. But I wanted to thank you for being such a good friend, for not asking too many questions when I needed privacy, and for listening when I needed to talk. Martinez handed her a small package, something to remember us by. Elena unwrapped it to find a simple compass, military issue but well-maintained. To help you find your way wherever you end up, Martinez explained. I'll carry it with me, Elena promised. The next morning, Elena packed her personal belongings into a single duffel bag. The red ribbon remained on her wrist now with 295 small knots. As she prepared to leave for her new assignment, she realized that this number might be the last she would count in quite the same way. The DIA work would be different, more complex, more varied, probably more dangerous. She might not have the same clear-cut mission parameters that allowed for simple counting, but she would find new ways to remember the importance of her work, new rituals to help her maintain her perspective, and humanity. Elena reported to the transportation office at 600 hours. An unmarked vehicle was waiting to take her to the airport, where she would catch the first of several flights to her new training facility. As the base disappeared behind them, Elena looked down at her ribbon one last time. Nuts. 25 successful missions, 295 moments when her skills had made a difference in ways both large and small. Whatever came next, those experiences had shaped her into the soldier and person she'd become. The future was uncertain, but Elena felt ready for it. She had proven to herself and others that she could handle difficult assignments with grace and effectiveness. The counting would continue, perhaps in different ways, but the underlying commitment to meaningful work would remain constant. As the vehicle carried her toward her new life, Elena began to imagine what the next chapter would bring. New challenges, new skills, new opportunities to make a difference, and somewhere along the way, new knots in her ribbon marking new successes in service of causes larger than herself. 3 years later, Elena stood in a small apartment in Prague cleaning a different kind of weapon. The suppressor was more advanced than the one she'd maintained in that tent so long ago, designed for urban environments and close quarters work. Her hands moved with the same methodical precision, but everything else about her situation had changed dramatically. The DIA training had been exactly as challenging as promised. 18 months of intensive instruction in languages, cultural analysis, surveillance techniques, and advanced combat methods. She'd learned to blend into civilian populations, to gather intelligence through seemingly casual interactions, and to execute missions that required weeks or months of careful preparation. Her red ribbon still circled her wrist, though it was now hidden beneath an expensive watch that served as part of her cover identity. The knots had continued to accumulate, though at a slower pace. The work was different now, more complex, with success measured in intelligence gathered as much as threats eliminated. Elena had discovered that she enjoyed the intellectual challenges of deep cover work. Each assignment was like solving a complex puzzle, requiring her to understand not just the tactical situation, but the cultural, political, and personal motivations of everyone involved. Her natural ability to observe details and patterns served her well in this environment. The phone in her apartment buzzed with an encrypted message. New assignment details transmitted through channels so secure that even she didn't fully understand the technology involved. Elena read the brief, noting the location, timeline, and general objectives. Another puzzle to solve, another opportunity to make a difference. As she prepared for the mission, Elena reflected on how much her life had changed since that conversation in Major Harrison's tent. The scared young soldier who had worried about her counting ritual being discovered seemed like a different person entirely. She'd learned to trust her instincts, to value her unique perspective, and to find meaning in work that often had no clear resolution. Her apartment in Prague was temporary, like all her living situations now. But she'd made it comfortable with a few personal items, a photo of her old unit, the compass Martinez had given her, and a small box containing letters from former colleagues. The ribbon on her wrist was the only constant, the one thing that connected her current life to her past. Elena finished cleaning her weapon and began preparing her cover identity for the next assignment. New documents, new backstory, new personality to inhabit. She'd become skilled at these transformations, at becoming whoever the mission required while maintaining her core sense of self. The knots in her ribbon now numbered 341. The counting had evolved along with her work. Some knots represented traditional mission successes, threats eliminated, attacks prevented. Others marked intelligence breakthroughs, successful infiltrations or operations that prevented conflicts from escalating. The ribbon had become a record not just of her actions but of her contribution to larger strategic objectives. Elena's phone rang, a call from a number she recognized but hadn't heard from in months. She answered using one of her cover names, a habit that had become automatic. "Elena, it's Director Williams. We need to talk." Elena felt a familiar tension in her chest. Calls from Director Williams usually meant significant changes ahead. "Yes, ma'am." "When and where?" "Tomorrow, 1400 hours, Vienna." The usual place. The line went dead. Elena looked at her packed equipment, then at the mission brief she'd received earlier. Whatever Williams wanted to discuss would take priority over her current assignment. That meant something big was developing. Elena spent the evening making secure arrangements to delay her current mission and travel to Vienna. The usual place was a safe house maintained by the agency for high-level meetings. She'd been there twice before, both times for conversations that had significantly altered her career trajectory. The next afternoon, Elena arrived at the Vienna safe house exactly on time. Director Williams was waiting in the secure conference room, along with two people Elena didn't recognize. One was a woman in her 50s wearing a State Department badge. The other was a man in military dress uniform with insignia Elena couldn't immediately identify. "Elena, thank you for coming," Director Williams said. "I'd like you to meet Deputy Secretary Morrison from State and General Chen from Joint Special Operations Command." Elena shook hands with both officials, noting the firm grips and direct eye contact that suggested people accustomed to making important decisions. "Please, sit down," Director Williams continued. "We have a proposition for you." Elena took a seat across from the three officials, automatically cataloging details of their body language and expressions. Years of intelligence work had made such observations instinctive. Deputy Secretary Morrison spoke first. "Ms. Chen, your work over the past 3 years has been exemplary. Your success rate remains unprecedented, and your ability to adapt to complex international environments has impressed multiple agencies." General Chen added, "We are particularly interested in your psychological profile. Dr. Reeves's ongoing evaluations indicate that you've maintained exceptional stability and effectiveness despite working in increasingly challenging situations." Elena waited for them to explain what they wanted from her. Director Williams opened a folder marked with classifications Elena had never seen before. "We're creating a new program, Elena, something that doesn't officially exist and never will. It requires individuals with very specific capabilities and psychological characteristics." "What kind of program?" Elena asked. "International Crisis Response," Deputy Secretary Morrison explained. "Situations where conventional diplomatic or military solutions aren't viable. Operations that require someone who can work independently for extended periods, make complex decisions under pressure, and achieve objectives without official support or recognition." General Chen leaned forward. "We're looking for people who can be deployed anywhere in the world, assume any necessary identity, and accomplish missions that prevent larger conflicts or humanitarian disasters." Elena understood what they were describing. "You want me to become a ghost operative?" "We want you to become the best ghost operative we've ever trained," Director Williams corrected. The program would involve 2 years of additional specialized training, followed by assignments that could last months or even years. "The work would be more complex and consequential than anything you've done before." Elena thought about her ribbon, about the 341 knots that represented her journey from that quiet maintenance tent to this secure conference room in Vienna. Each knot had marked growth, learning, and increasing responsibility. "Would I continue to work alone?" she asked. "Primarily, yes," General Chen replied, "though some assignments might involve coordination with other assets or temporary team configurations." Deputy Secretary Morrison added, "Elena, the situations we're talking about are the ones that keep world leaders awake at night. Regional conflicts that could become global wars, terrorist networks planning massive attacks, humanitarian crises that could destabilize entire regions. Your work would have impact on a scale that most people never even realize exists." Elena looked at each of the three officials. "And if I succeed in this program, what happens then?" Director Williams smiled. "Then you become one of the most valuable assets in the entire intelligence community. Someone who can be trusted with the most sensitive operations and the most critical decisions." Elena touched her wrist where the ribbon lay hidden beneath her watch. 341 knots, each representing a moment when her skills had mattered. The number seemed small compared to what they were offering her now. "I accept," she said quietly. General Chen nodded approvingly. "We hoped you would." "Training begins in 3 weeks at a facility that doesn't appear on any official maps. You'll receive detailed instructions shortly." As the meeting concluded and Elena prepared to leave, Director Williams approached her privately. "Elena, I want you to understand what you're committing to. This program will challenge everything you think you know about yourself and your capabilities. But if you complete it successfully, you'll have opportunities to influence world events in ways that very few people ever can." Elena nodded, understanding the weight of what she was accepting. Ma'am, may I ask one question? Of course. Will I still be allowed to maintain my personal practices? The things that help me process and remember my work? Director Williams smiled. Elena, your personal practices are part of what makes you so effective. We would never ask you to change something that contributes to your success. As Elena left the Vienna safe house, she thought about the red ribbon around her wrist. Soon it would begin accumulating knots that represented an entirely new kind of mission, a new level of responsibility, an impact. The quiet soldier who had once cleaned weapons in a desert maintenance tent was about to become something unprecedented, a guardian operating in the shadows of international affairs, protecting global stability through actions that would never be acknowledged or celebrated. Elena looked forward to adding the next knot to her ribbon, whenever that moment might come. The counting would continue, marking her contribution to causes larger than herself, one successful mission at a time.